At the point when sequential executioners are gotten, they are expelled from society. In any case, the enduring physical proof of their wrongdoings, the house where they submitted their killings, is regularly left for all to see. They are frequently known as places of horrors, a fairly newspaper term, yet one which briefly depicts their grim, inerasable past. Now and then they are obliterated and all proof of even the plot is evacuated. Different occasions the houses are annihilated and new ones are worked in their place. Some simply get left where they are, a vacation spot for those with over-the-top nosiness. The following are 10 instances of places of horrors and what happened to them after their occupants left. John Wayne Gacy, known as the Killer Clown, was sentenced for slaughtering 33 individuals somewhere in the range of 1972 and 1978, making him one of the most productive sequential executioners in the United States. Gacy was conceived in 1942 to Marion and John Gacy Sr., a damaging alcoholic who the youthful Gacy revered. Gacy was referred to in his neighborhood as benevolent individual, continually ready to help nearby causes, frequently taking on the appearance of a jokester to engage the youngsters. It before long became evident that Gacy had another side, however. In the late 1960s he invested energy in jail, having been blamed for sodomizing a youngster who worked in a similar establishment eatery he had gotten utilized by throughout his significant other's dad. Subsequent to being discharged from jail, Gacy discovered that his better half had left him. He wedded again in 1972, and things appeared to be working out positively. He was mainstream in the nearby neighborhood, and regularly had individuals around to his home on 8213 Summerdale Avenue, in spite of the fact that individuals much of the time griped about the smell originating from the cellar. In spite of the fact that he had just started killing previously. Upon his second spouse's takeoff in 1975, Gacy's killing heightened. His usual methodology was to welcome little youngsters back to his home to show them an enchantment stunt with counterfeit binds. Having controlled them, he would kill them and cover them in the creep space underneath the house. He was in the long run captured for his violations when his last casualty was connected to him. During the expulsion of the 27 bodies covered at Gacy's property, police obliterated the house. The parts stood surrendered for a considerable length of time before being purchased. Another property was based on it and the location was changed to lose would-be tourists. The property still pulled in guests, be that as it may. Some who might show up on a visit transport to cop at the home of one of the most noticeably awful sequential executioners in American history. Dennis Nilsen was a British serial executioner with a propensity for keeping his casualties' stays around his home long after he had dispatched them. He has been known as the English Jeffrey Dahmer. Nilsen invested energy in the Army and the Metropolitan Police Force before leaving his obligations and beginning his killing binge in 1978. Nilsen discovered his casualties by trawling the bars and clubs in the territory and welcoming men back to his level. Terrified of the forlornness which would tail them leaving, he would kill them and regularly invest energy laying down with their cadavers before discarding them. He went through 3 years slaughtering at his first location, 195 Melrose Avenue, where he would consume the remaining parts in the back garden or cover them under the planks of flooring. 12 casualties were killed in the main location, causing Nilsen issues with capacity. He in the long run needed to fall back on over and over splash his room in light of the quantity of flies the carcasses were drawing in. In 1981 he moved to 23 Cramley Gardens, where he slaughtered a further 3 individuals. It was here his violations were found after different inhabitants of the structure called a handyman to explore the smell originating from the channels. The handyman found human remains and the police were reached. He was condemned to life in jail in 1983. The two houses are as yet standing, both despite everything have inhabitants who naturally don't care for discussing the past. In August 2013, Nilsson's Cranley Gardens home was put available for £100,000, lower than the incentive in the desire for pulling in anybody to attempt to overlook what occurred there. At the intersection of Beachcomber Lane and Sea Lark Road lies a house with a heartbreaking past. Until June 2001, it was the home of Russell and Andrea Yates. The couple met living in a similar high-rise in Texas and later wedded, promising to have whatever number of kids as could reasonably be expected. Andrea had experienced despondency and a dietary problem in her adolescent years, however appeared to be glad in substance during her initial relationship with Rusty. The issues began after the introduction of their fourth child, Luke, in February 1999. Andrea endeavored self-destruction a few times and was put on Haldol to facilitate her downturn, which appeared to work to some degree, with her state of mind getting more settled and episodes getting rarer. The couple were exhorted by their PCP to have no more youngsters. However, in the long run, Andrea got pregnant with her fifth kid, a young lady they named Mary, conceived on November 30, 2000. Upon the introduction of Mary, Andrea quit taking her professionally prescribed medicine and backslid back into extreme wretchedness. Russell was unequivocally exhorted by their primary care physician, Mohammed Saeed, to forestall Andrea from investing any energy alone with the youngsters, yet Russell overlooked the alerts. Accepting that she required more independence, on June 20, 2001, Andrea was left with the kids. Rusty left for work. She made a beeline for the restroom, ran a shower, and continued to deliberately suffocate every last bit of her 5 kids individually. She at that point rang her better half and expressed now is the right time. Yates was detained for the killings before being moved to a mental office in 2006 after a retrial saw her not as liable by reason of craziness. The 3-room home, despite everything, stands and now fills in as an investment property, in the wake of being redesigned following the violations. It initially pulled in a great deal of consideration from individuals who had perused of the case, yet now appreciates an increasingly serene presence. Until the arrival of the book The Devil in the White City in 2003, Holmes was practically obscure in mainstream society, which is astonishing considering he killed somewhere in the range of 9 and 200 individuals during the 1880s and 1890s. Holmes was conceived Herman Henry Mudgett in New Hampshire in 1861. He went to clinical school and thought of a technique for bringing in cash from the bodies in the lab there. He would take them, deform them so they couldn't be perceived, and guarantee that the individuals were slaughtered in different mishaps so he could guarantee cash on protection arrangements he had taken out on them. He later moved to Chicago, an event city which was planning to have the 1903 World's Fair, and assembled an inn that he said was to be utilized for lodging a huge number of anticipated guests. Nonetheless, the reality of the situation was altogether different. Holmes had the structure made so that he could slaughter its inhabitants and transport them to the storm cellar for removal through a progression of trapdoors, concealed passages, and sections. The bodies would then be deprived of fragile living creature and offered to clinical schools. He ensured that he utilized a progression of various developers with the goal that no single one knew about the whole plans. The structure even housed its own gas chamber, which Holmes would secure casualties before suffocating them. Holmes was hanged in 1896 and the lodging was in the end annihilated, yet its area is accepted to be that of the Englewood post office. Some in part constructed inside dividers despite everything exist in the cellar, which could have had a place with the murder stronghold. John Christie and his better half Ethel were portrayed as lovely couple who remained quiet about themselves. They showed up simply like a typical consistently couple to anybody they met. Yet John had some profound issues which would later bring about him getting one of the most notorious British sequential executioners. The two inhabited 10 Rillington Place, a keep-going house on a road in Notting Hill, London. Christie's homicide binge started in 1943 when he killed Ruth Furist, a neighborhood prostitute. He covered her in the back nursery, which would be later loaded up with progressively appalling casualties, somewhere in the range of 1943 and 1953. At any rate, 8 individuals would be killed by Christie in the Rillington Place lined house. An abnormal turn happened anyway in 1949, when a tenant of Christie's, Timothy Evans, educated police that his significant other and kid had been killed at the location. Police found the bodies and clearly extricated a constrained admission from Evans, which he later retracted, reprimanding Christie for the violations. Notwithstanding his requests, he was hanged in 1950 for the homicides, permitting Christie to continue slaughtering for an additional 3 years, including killing his significant other Ethel in 1952. Christie was in the end kicked out of the house by his proprietor when it was found he was renting to an alternate couple. Another occupant discovered bodies stuffed inside the kitchen recess and Christie was captured. He was hanged by acclaimed killer Albert Pierpoint in July 1953. While trying to remove consideration from the location, Rillington Place was renamed Ruston Close soon after the killings and was involved until the whole road's destruction in the mid-1970s. The first area of the house is currently accepted to be among Bartwell and St. Mark's Road in Notting Hill.